listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are live from America and way outside the Matrix. It is time for the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines, a free speech zone. This is The Backstory. And when I say a free speech zone, I'll be talking about that, one of a dwindling number of free speech zones. There's a lot of bad news in the free speech front, and we'll get to it right after we talk about who's on the show today. Now, let me, Rod, I need your help here, okay?
Yeah, I'm here.
So, it's Fronczak, correct?
Faran Fronczak, yes.
Faran Fronczak is our guest in the first hour. First-time guest, and I don't want to, I hate mispronouncing people's names, and I do it too often. So, I don't want to do it. Therefore, I'm asking. So when she's on, we don't embarrass her. Or me, really. I'm more concerned about me, I'll be honest. But Faran Fronczak, she used to do the news over at RT when RT was a thing. And we're looking forward to talking to her. She's now the co-host of the show Fault Lines right here on Radio Sputnik in the morning, along with Jamal Thomas. And joining us in the second hour, Scotty Nell Hughes, who also used to do news over at RT. We'll be talking to Scotty. We love talking to Scotty. I've known Scotty for years prior to working here. And she's what we call a pro-liberty stalwart. She was a Tea Party person. And we'll talk to Scotty about the state of play. And, of course, it's Frosty Friday. Is it not, Rod? That's correct, right?
Correct.
There we go. And so Mark Frost, is Mark there?
I am here.
Mark, hi. How you doing?
Doing quite well. Busy day, but good.
So well, you have to go. You can hang out, right? You can do a show,
course, yeah.
right?
I'm just saying, super busy day. But other than that,
I kind of had a busy day too. So, kismet. But we're also taking your calls, 202-521-1320, here on Fault Lines. Oops, what am I saying? We're the backstory. The backstory. See, this is why sometimes people say the name. It was confusing me because Faran is the co-host of Fault Lines now, and I said that for years. So forgive my bafflement at what show I'm on. I get confused, Mark. I'll be honest.
You're getting old, man.
I know. And like I say, I hosted Fault Lines for years, and now we got the backstory. And I say it is a dwindling free speech zone, and let me tell you why. I'll tell you, it may not be the top story, but to me it's one of them, and here's why. I don't like it when, look, if Facebook or YouTube is doing bad, censorious stuff, I've come to expect that. Yet you see what I'm saying, Mark?
Yes, and I think you're going where I was wanting to go, because I was like, okay, I'm going to make it a point today to talk about the metaverse.
Yes, and does it begin with a duck?
I think it does, and it's
okay.
And it's independent from my position, as a lover of liberty position. It's independent of your view on the Russian-Ukraine conflict. It's independent of it.
Right. And me too. It is independent of it, and it's a bigger issue. And I'll say this to set it up. Later, I'll make the point that if I say Ukraine has become the new mask, it has become the new Black Lives Matter or rainbow flag in your avatar. If I say that, does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, and I even have done a couple little experiments, because I do cat rescue, so there's a lot of volunteers that we have, with us of various disciplines and different levels of education. And so one person was just fired up about it. So I asked him a quick question. I go, can you name 2 countries that border Ukraine other than Russia? And they couldn't do it. So what that tells me is their rage extrovertedly expressed. I'm not saying they're not feeling anything. I'm saying that that feeling is the genesis of that feeling is a form of groupthink. And that's what I don't like. I don't like it when we do it. I don't like it when Russians do it. I don't like it when anyone does it. And by the way, I'm about to hear if you hear a pop, it's not a beer, it's a Mountain Dew.
Okay. By the way, that may be banned in Russia. We'll see.
Oh.
Has Mountain Dew pulled out of Russia? I don't know. Coke and Pepsi, we'll talk about the market implications of this stuff. But let's talk about what I was going to say. DuckDuckGo, the search engine that a lot of people looked to as an alternative to Google. If they didn't like the policies of Google, they had DuckDuckGo, they felt like. Right? And DuckDuckGo came out, the head of it, and said, we're going to bias search results. He said that. He admitted it, at least. A lot of times they don't admit it. So if I give him a half a point of credit, it's for admitting it. We're going to bias search results. And this is so disappointing to me because when an alternative sells out, I don't know how else to put it. I don't even know if they sold out for money. They caved into social pressure. And the idea that they would bias search results is deeply offensive to me. And it instantly lost them the one thing that made them unique, right? Because search is search. But they were saying, we're not going to bias the search results. And now they come out and say they will do it. And furthermore, to bury disinformation. And I'll just say this point. A lot of stuff that has been called Russian disinformation, like the Hunter Biden laptop story, clear example, turned out to be absolutely true. So if they'd gone along with that at the time, the whole Russia narrative, anytime you'd push back against it, it's Russian disinformation. And a lot of stuff, I'll put it like this, like right now, and I'll talk about this later, but despite Victoria Nuland's admitting there are biolabs that the U.S. was aware of, and I'll put it like this, if we're aware of them, we're controlling them, period. Because we control the whole country. Why would we say, well, you know what, we'll overthrow the government, but we won't have a say in the biolabs? It makes no sense. It's absurd. But I really am bothered by this. And that's what I have to say, Mark. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's not where I thought you were going, though. But yes, this does bother me. I just looked it up right now. I think I know why they probably caved a bit, because they're a customer of Amazon Web Services. That's how their system works, and they use InSoNet as their DNS library. So they're not an independent internet. They're not an independent browser like Google is. They depend on the big players for it to work. Just like Parler. I mean, that's how Parler was taken down. It wasn't the government that took Parler down directly. It was the other big 800-pound gorillas in tech that Parler depended on for it to work. But what got me really upset, Lee, and I mean, it really got to me, because I think we're creating a Frankenstein in the United States. And again, my opinion here, in my assessment, this is independent of your view of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. Meta, Facebook, announced that in Ukraine, you can say death to Russians. You can say, go kill people. You can advocate violence. Well, if advocating violence is bad, why is it good in some... So we have a private tech company, or better said, we have a private journalism company, media company, masquerading as a tech company, that is dictating basically geopolitical policy. And there's something inherently wrong with that. And again, whether you're on one side or the other of this issue, the unintended consequences down the road of this is going to be a slippery slope that we all should be concerned about.
Well, and let me take you down that slippery slope a little bit. Israel has been very aggressive against Palestinians. And there's plenty of footage of the Israeli government cracking down on Palestinian protesters. And they've bombed settlements and so on. And everyone knows this. Now, if someone was offended by what Israel's doing, and plenty of people are, and decide to say, it's okay to kill Israelis or Jews, and we should assassinate their leaders, the Jew leaders, do you think Facebook will put up with that for 1 second? Right? But how's it different? Someone explain to me, if people are saying, well, it's okay to go after Russia and Russians in general, and Putin specifically, why is it better if you're offended that Russia invaded Ukraine and civilians are dying? Let's say that's your offense. Because I don't see what else. I'll put it like this. That's being bothered that civilians are dying and that Russia invaded is a valid position. I don't think it's correct personally. And I think it misunderstands that Russia was acting, in a sense, absolutely preemptively and against, not just preemptively, but also against years of provocations and murder by Eastern Ukrainians. But the only valid position is an anti-violence one, to me. You see what I'm saying, Mark?
Yeah, what I don't like is the hypocrisy. If it's wrong in online media to call for violence, it's wrong to call for violence. That means it's wrong when conservative nut jobs in the Capitol, loot the Capitol. It's also just as bad when Antifa is burning cities. And I don't think anyone will dispute where Facebook, especially, and Twitter, probably secondly, has fallen on that fence line. They're clearly have taken sides in numerous situations, and that I have said since the very beginning, since this whole controversy started, a few years ago, and that this will be the demise of big tech. They're playing with fire, and they're going to get burned, because here's what's going to happen. They're going to annoy people sufficiently so that Democrats and Republicans start thinking, you know what, let's get together and regulate these people, because, yeah, they're nice to me now, but that doesn't mean they're going to be next month.
And let's point out, there's market alternatives, and we're going to start this show over the weekend. I'm going to work on getting this show up on Odyssey and Rumble. These are two platforms that have said, and we'll talk to Faran about this. She's got a story about the film Revealing Ukraine. We had the director yesterday, Igor Lepadnik, on the show. We got one of the stars of Revealing Ukraine sitting right here talking to you. Hi, that's me. And Faran, when she comes on, she's got on her personal website, she's got a piece about this. But they were taken down by YouTube. Speaking of taken down by YouTube, my understanding is internationally, RT and Sputnik's, RT's site was the most watched news site on YouTube. And they're about to take it down, is my understanding. And Sputnik. And so we are going to get this show up on platforms that aren't going to censor us, like Rumble. And Odyssey has said, we've been asked to do this, and we're not going to do it. And you know what? I want to pick on Elon Musk for a split second. I don't like reflexively. I like a lot of stuff about Elon Musk. I do. And I'm very happy to live in a world where Elon Musk is out there doing what I consider very innovative stuff, including the Boring Company, his company that's building underground trains.
Real quick.
I think Yeah, Mark? Okay. And, but Elon Musk has been virtue signaling on Ukraine. But he said Starlink, his internet service, he's not going to take down, he's not going to deny people access. And I thought that was a good move by Elon Musk. 202-521-1320. Brave in Atlanta. What is on your mind, sir?
Hey, what's going on? Two things. First, I got to disagree with Mark Fronczak just a little bit. Even though I'm on his side and I see where he's going, and I agree with him. I don't think that we're on a slippery slope. I don't think we're headed toward a slippery slope anymore. I think that we've slipped off the slope, and we are in the alcohol bath after falling down the hill of razor blades. We're in it, and when everything was cancellation concerned with while Trump was in office, and they were pulling this massive side, making people pick sides and choose sides, and then you went directly into COVID, and then you get to pick sides and choose sides, and then you had all of the censorship and the shutting down of conversations, and you could. Those were all those. I think that was the slippery slope time, if there was. I think that we are seeing the machine in effect, and they're just fine tuning it. I know you mentioned before that Kim Iverson, for whatever reasons, with this current war situation, may not readily come on, but maybe you can reach out to her and just ask her, or even check out her channel and see the video she did almost a year now ago, where she was talking about when Biden and when the Biden administration met with all of the big tech companies as he was getting ready to go in, or once he went in, and no one knows what that conversation was about, but his administration met with all of the big tech companies, as Amazon, Google, Facebook, and a few others, and they actually got contracts. They got government contracts, and no one knows what those contracts are about because that no one else covered that story. No one else went in depth in that story. But if you look at what's going on now, I think it's pretty easy to tell what deals were being made and what conversations were being had, because what we're seeing is unprecedented, and that's why I believe that we're no longer headed towards the slippery slope. I think that we are no longer on the slope we slipped off of. We are seeing the machine in action.
Okay, I'll give Mark a chance to respond to the point that we've slipped off the slope. Great call, Brave, as usual. But let me just mention one quick related headline. I saw this today. The White House is now meeting with TikTok influencers, which I assume is a number of 12-year-olds, which, watch out for Joe Biden. I'm just saying, don't let him near the hair. That's my suggestion. But they're meeting with TikTok influencers to give them talking points on Ukraine. So just what we need is TikTok influencers being woke on Ukraine. Woke Nazis, but young ones who make dance, who know how to apply makeup. But Mark, do you think it's possible?
You realize that?
Yes, I'm working on the film rights now. Mark,
make a great B movie.
With Brave, that we may have fallen off the slippery slope already?
I understand his metaphor. The slippery slope I'm talking about is 20 years from now, because what we're doing is we're setting precedent. So I agree with what he's saying, but to extend the metaphor, yeah, we've slipped off the slope, but the slope is very long. And there comes a point when you can't stop slipping. And right this second, we can, if we choose to. But there is a point of no return that you can reach. We're not there yet, but it can come. And so that's my problem with it.
And you're saying, Brave, cheer up. It can't get worse. It can. It's possible to get worse than this.
I'm saying he's right. We've already started to slip. So let's put it that way.
But it hasn't gotten as bad as it could get.
But we haven't got to the razor blades and alcohol yet. So that would be my reply.
202-521-1320. Let's go to Ingrid in D.C. Ingrid, what is on your mind?
Hey, what you said about going to Rumble, it's good there's some place people can go and still communicate, but this is another problem, is that this is going to increase the polarization, because a lot of people won't go there. I had a strange thing happen the other day. I sent somebody a clip from a French news show, and I sent it to my friend and her husband because her husband is French. And it was interesting because there's a French-Ukrainian woman who'd come back from Kiev, and the hosts were asking her, you know, they were expecting to get this, oh, yes, it's terrible, all my relatives are trying to get out. And she was like, no, they're not leaving, and Zelensky's a horrible thug and all this, and they were really shocked. But my friend writes back and says, don't ever send this to me again. This is a QAnon site. And I'm guessing because this French news show had been loaded up onto BitChute. I had never heard there was some connection between BitChute, but people are so entrenched in like, ooh, I'm not going to go there. I can't go there. That's where the QAnon people go. That's where the Trump people go. That's where the Putin Nazis go. You know, it's really creepy because BitChute's just a platform. She wouldn't even look at it.
But here's my point is, and not, I don't want to hurt your friendships, but when you have a friend that dumb, they were not going to possibly look at the video and get the point you were making. I'm just saying, when someone's that far gone, I won't even use dumb, brainwashed. When someone is that far brainwashed that they're adverse to platforms and they're self-censoring, I say let them. Because there's nothing you're going to say, there's no rational argument you can make that's going to convince them otherwise. Mark, what say you before we go to Tarif?
I tend to agree with you. I mean, I think that what happens, almost all media is propaganda by some loose definition. And the difference between dumb people and intelligent people is intelligent people understand that complexity eliminates the possibility of an answer to be very, very simple. And for dumb people, everything is simple. Trump bad, Trump good, Putin bad, Putin good, all this type of things that they almost are incapable of seeing shades of gray in these things. And I could talk for hours on that. And again, if you study the history of the Middle East, if you study the history of Russia, there is a sense in, it might even just be human nature, but it's certainly in American nature, there is a sense of, just a sense of life that says, if you're not doing things like Americans do, there's something wrong with you. You're morally bankrupt. You're inferior. And if you go talk to people around the world, even people that generally like the United States, that's the one trait that we have that turns them off. It's a huffiness, arrogance that is distasteful. Because just because Americans do things a certain way doesn't mean the entire world needs to. What works for us doesn't necessarily work for the whole world. And we saw that with the end of the Soviet Union. The best, brightest minds we had to send them, we sent. And we told them to go cold turkey, go into markets, don't worry about the people, don't worry about any of that stuff. Just go cold turkey, head right into property rights, reorganize it, get it started. And what they got was the worst form of capitalism that can be imagined. And,
yes. Yes.
Is that our fault? No, but we certainly contributed to it. I mean, they chose it. I don't really buy into that thing that, especially in war, I don't buy into that thing that citizens of countries are innocent. They're not. We choose the choices that we make. I just read a thing in the news that was saying that the Ukrainian army is using tactics where you have an anti-tank missile. They don't just sit out in the street waiting for the trucks to come. They hide in apartments. And when the truck comes, what they want to do is hit the tank without anybody seeing it. And, well, once you start doing that, once you start having weapons in apartments that come out sort of intermittently, you've turned that apartment into a place of war. Now, is it good to show that? That's the question to ask. Is it good? Well, it's probably not good. But if you want to win the war, is it necessary? And the answer is yes. When a country is in war, first of all, war, I wished we didn't have to have war. I wished Russia wouldn't have invaded, but they have. And the fact that they have means that we have to, there's only one way to turn this off, and that's some form of compromise. And if neither side wants to compromise, well, the only thing left is war. That's what war does. When nobody wants to compromise, you go to war. That's how it works. And it stresses me because I think this whole thing is unnecessary. That's what stresses me. I think if you just look at a map, just literally, just go to the store, buy a globe, spin it, and look at the globe. There's no geo reason that the United States and Russia should be mortal enemies. There's just not. We don't have to be best friends, but if you want the one thing I know for a fact, just from just as an expert in economics, as an economist, sanctions rarely work. They rarely in human history obtain what they were advertised to get. And they usually are accompanied by long-ranging unintended consequences. By the way, John Stossel on Reason TV on YouTube, I just watched a video of his this morning that said a similar thing about the sanctions. It hurts the very, those sanctions aren't hurting Putin. I mean, do you think Putin himself directly is hurt by those sanctions? No, they're not. It's not hurting them. It's certainly annoying him. But the people that suffer from sanctions are the lowest people in that particular society, and we have a lot of data to go look at that. Cuba, sanctions did not get rid of Castro. In fact, what they actually did was they entrenched him in power because now he had an excuse. If we would have traded with Cuba, if we would have traded with Cuba, I'm sorry, what?
I want to come back to this topic, but I want to make sure because we got Sharif on the line. I want to get him, and then we got to get to a break. We'll pick that topic up. That topic of sanctions is hugely important. 202-521-1320. Let's go to Sharif.
Thank you for taking my call, gentlemen. I have two comments. First, I'd like to say free drilling science. My first comment is this. This is how Iran and Venezuela can get back with the U.S. They can sell it all to the U.S. as market price for $112 a barrel, right? Either cryptocurrency, gold, silver, rubles, yen, or their currencies, right? And also they can make the U.S. with all sanctions that's on them. And they could also do it through chip, what the Chinese have. They can go the other way instead of going through SWIFT. This how they can get back at the West. My second comment is, excuse me.
I think that's a good idea, but I recently heard the U.S., a number of politicians going after Venezuela especially hard. It's not going to happen, so I'm just going to say it's not going to happen. But it's a good idea, Sharif. Keep going.
Okay. My second comment is this, that the bioweapons lab, what's going to happen, the real evidence is going to come out. It's going to be held in the Donbass where they have the war crimes tribunal. China's going to be there, India, and a whole bunch of other people from the world going to be there watching and seeing what's taking place. That's when the real evidence is going to come out in the next months or next year, and that's when the real hell is going to break loose. That's what Pepe Escobar wrote. So next coming months, we're going to see what's going to happen with that evidence from the biolabs, what the Russians have.
Well, and good point. And I want to talk about the biolabs, and we'll be covering that in the show. But want to get to a break before we bring on our first-time guest, Faran Fronczak. I don't want to mispronounce her name. especially when she's about to be on. But Faran Fronczak joining us next on The Backstory.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
And we are back. I'm Lee Stranahan. This is The Backstory. 105.5 FM, AM 1390. We are joined by guest host Mark Frost, prog rock drummer, entrepreneur, educator. And we'll talk to him more about the sanctions thing. He's making a very important point about sanctions. And I really want you to understand one thing is, whatever you think of the war, the sanctions ain't working. They're not slowing things down. But want to get to our first guest. She's a first-time guest, and she's the co-host of Fault Lines, now with Fronczak and Thomas. So I want to join someone, and I'll tell the story of how I first saw her. Faran Fronczak, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Lee, it is a pleasure speaking with you. I am honored to be filling the seat that you once sat in for that show. Great to be here.
Well, thanks. I probably broken the cushion for you because, you know, I'm heavy. But
definitely an improvement, Faran.
Thanks, Mark.
It is indeed improvement. Mark, Faran, Mark.
Oh, he was on our show 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. Mark's a frequent guest on Fault Lines, and because he's a great guest, but we have him as a guest host, so there. Nah. But let me say this, Faran. I first noticed you on Twitter because you had a great tweet. I thought it was great anyway. The "This is chilling" tweet. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yes, the great Oliver Stone. Yes.
She had a tweet saying "This is chilling" and pointing out the Oliver Stone executive produced, Igor Lopatnik directed, me co-starred film revealing Ukraine. And I noticed that because, of course, I'm in it and have an ego. But your tweet putting out information about and a clip of revealing Ukraine, Faran, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know here. That tweet went viral. I was seeing so many retweets of that, right?
Well, I think it started when you retweeted it. And for those that haven't seen it, I do have it pinned on my Twitter. But it just so happened a week and a half ago when the invasion and everything all started, it's like, hey, let's sit down and watch this, because as a journalist, I think you need to be open to watch everything. Just like how I watched Winter on Fire, Ukraine's fight for freedom. And in the first 30 seconds of the scene, you see a 16-year-old who's wearing a Stefan Bandera scarf around his neck. And I was like, whoa. But the Oliver Stone clip, he talks about all of the different problems that's gone on with Ukraine since the Maidan coup, for those that haven't seen it. And in the clip, he says, I feel sorry for Ukraine because I think it's a button that the United States is going to push just to get to Russia. And the chilling part about this is he says this in 2019, well before this all went down. And when this happened, I mean, I had to pause and take a second, and I was like, we need to just let that settle in for a second, because we are living where the United States has just pushed that button to get to Russia.
And so what happened was, I noticed that tweet, and I follow a lot of people on Twitter, and I don't pay careful attention to everyone. But when I see somebody who's saying what I consider salient good points, and I just noticed there was this person with 2 F's in their name. I didn't even bother pronouncing it, but you know what I'm saying. I just saw the avatar and sort of didn't even look to click on it to see your biography. That's where I kept noticing you were a person who makes good tweets. And so I didn't know that you were the person I'd been noticing making good tweets. You know what happens on Twitter? Occasionally you go, this person's stupid or this person's smart. You just see a name and an avatar and you go, okay, that's that smart dude and that's that stupid dude or whatever. You were a smart dude. And I kept noticing you were making good points, but I didn't know who you were. And actually my son Shane was telling me, he's a former co-host of Fault Lines. My son Shane, I was talking to him, he went on a long bike ride recently, and I was talking to him, and he was telling me that you were hosting, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together. The 2 and 2 being that you were the person on Twitter. So anyway, welcome. I'm stupid.
No, like I said, it's great to be here. No, because you know why? A lot of times on Twitter, you see a lot of people, just like you said, where you're like, okay, that's either now there's a Russian bot or a Ukrainian bot, and then you're like, oh, that's the smart guy, that's the dumb guy. But you had actually retweeted it because I think I had tagged you. I had done the tweet, and then I had tagged a bunch of people like you, George Galloway, my beautiful colleague you're having after this, Scotty Nell Hughes. And all of a sudden you retweeted it. And thanks to you, it started going viral, I will say, because you have a massive following. And that's when I got all these followers, and they started going through my tweets, and then the trolls came. But, it's one of these things where you take the good with the bad.
Well, no, and let me say, I've got a decent following, but not as big as Galloway. And we'll talk about Galloway soon, too, because I saw you had a fun interview with him recently. Yeah. And tell people, let's just get the pimpage out of the way. Tell people how to get to your private site, because you've got a lot of good stuff up there. So tell them in clear terms that a radio audience will be able to find you on the internets.
So everything for me across the board is fair and balanced, and it's F as in Frank, ARAN, fair and balanced. You can see on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. But yeah, Twitter's been fun. And it's funny, is my other colleague at RT America, Manila Chan, and we even said, we were never really that active on Twitter. But then when all this stuff started going down, we couldn't help but start tweeting stuff out. For example, one of them being the Snake Island story. And we were like, people, this has not been confirmed yet. You can't just throw this out there without any confirmation. Her and I are journalists at heart. And, we just like yourself, and you're always told, Get confirmation. Where's the source? Get confirmation. And the amount of things that we have seen that's just thrown out there and people take it as fact without even figuring out if it's fiction. And again, in case in point, the Snake Island story. And we started getting a following, and you could see you had two groups of people, very much like how you had back 6 years ago, which I can't even believe it's been 6 years ago, in 2016, where you had the hardcore Trumpers and the hardcore Hillaryers. And we are at that point now where you're either with Ukraine or you are a Putin puppet. And it's very sad that we're back to that polarization again, because I thought Joe Biden was going to restore the soul of the nation. Apparently, it's on the brink of collapse yet again.
Well, and I have a different philosophy. Where one of our callers, Ingrid, called in and said she had a friend who wouldn't look at something because the platform was on. I come from the Andrew Breitbart school on this. Andrew always used to say, I like to know your bias. So he liked the fact that in England you had papers that you knew were conservative and papers that you knew were, you know, labor, let's say, right? He said what he doesn't like is CNN and New York Times and USA Today and whatnot pretending that they're objective. Don't pretend.
That's the outrageous thing. That's what gets people. That right there.
Yes, and that's why when it started, I put a Russian flag in my bio. I'm one of those people who's fine with going, I am pro-Russian. Ask me about it, and I'll tell you. I'm not trying to pretend, but by the way, I'm pro-Russian for a reason, because I've studied the issue and have been pro-Russian. But I like that bias. In other words, I like an admission of bias. An admission of bias. Let me be clear. I like someone saying, this is where I come from. Here's my position. Now take it or leave it. And I'm fine. I can deal with somebody who says I'm pro-Ukraine. Just say it. But don't try to make yourself out to be objective. What do you think about that, Faran?
So it's interesting because I come from a local news background. I was a local news anchor across the country from South Bend, Indiana, Grand Rapids, Rockford, Illinois, El Paso, Texas, Austin, Texas, and then Washington, D.C. I've been around. And one of the things that I really held my hat on was because I was in El Paso when Donald Trump won the 2016 election. And I saw the biases in much of local news, and it used to drive me crazy because I truly am that objective voice where I would say, hey, that's not cool, and the Republicans are bad today, and then the next day, the Democrats are being a bunch of hypocrites. And the reason why, and many people get a little shaken up by this, but I do not vote. And there's a perfect reason to it. I don't have a voting record because I saw CNN and Fox and how polarized they got. When you turned on the TV, you knew exactly who that anchor was. I will give Sean Hannity this. He does call himself an editorial anchor. However, the rest of them, like Anderson Cooper and all of them, they act like they're objective. And just like you said, they're not. I don't vote because I feel, one, many are like, oh, well, people died for your right to vote. And I say, well, yeah, they also died for freedom of the press. And I should have that right to question every single side, and every person's feet should be held to the fire equally as the other. So when you have anchors, for example, that let's say they voted for Hillary Clinton and Hillary Clinton loses, in the back of their warped mind, it's going to be, okay, well, let's prove why our candidate should have won, and let's prove why Donald Trump shouldn't be in there. And then on the other side, it's, hey, let's prove why Donald Trump is so wonderful and why he should have won the election, even though the Democrats are trying to bring him down. Exactly. Me, it's like, I'm looking at all of you and you're all crazy. And I'm going to point it out every single day. But now when it comes to this Russia-Ukraine situation, what's happening here is you have this dichotomy of people who are not experts on the subject all of a sudden think they are because they watched an hour of of primetime news on an hour of primetime cable news. And it's like, no, just like yourself. I've been studying this for the past year and a half. I didn't know before I came to RT America that there was fighting in the Donbass region because the media never told me. And I was in local news, and we sure as hell weren't talking about it in local news. So it was one of these, okay, let's go back, let's study it. I watched a number of documentaries. I interviewed people from the area. I talked to all different sides. I talked to a Ukrainian national. I talked to a Russian national. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. However, the fact that it's become so polarized, and then you add on top of it, no offense, idiots who think they're experts and they're going to come on and tell you how to think. And then you say, well, point to me where the Donbass region is. And they look at you like, what? And it's like, exactly, read a book.
Right. That's a very basic point. It's almost like the question Mark Frost was asking people, name 2 countries that are near it. People should be able to do that. Mark, do you have a question for Faran?
Yeah, 2 questions. First of all, where'd you get that thick, awesome hair, lady?
I have to give that to my mother. I always say I was
that's
born
some good genetics. Let me tell you, right there.
I was born in Chicago, but my hair was born in Texas.
Yay, Texas! That's my home. So, what I agree 100%. You know, for instance, Reason Magazine last election did a little issue. They got a lot of flack from the other media for it, and all of their writers said who they were voting for, and half of them didn't vote. You know, and they're like, why? It doesn't interest me. You know, one quoted the Who. You know, in comes the old boss, out goes the, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, it seems to me that what aggravates people who go to the trouble to learn something is what we were talking about earlier. How dumb people want to distill a complex issue down to 5 words or just a truism.
Right.
And it can be, is the Russia invasion of Ukraine good? Or it could be something like, does government spending cause excessive inflation? There's not easy, quick, packaged answers that categorically answer and explain that whole thing, because there's many other variables in there that you have to account for on a it depends basis on that sort of a thing. And I like what Faran said earlier about, you know, some journalists, they're just lazy. In fact, my favorite economist said that the doom of capitalism is it subsidizes the dumb journalists. He called them social dilettantes, people who know nothing and so talk about everything. And that worries me.
I forget what famous philosopher or psychologist said it, but right now what we're seeing is it's like the experts on the field and on the subject, like myself, like yourself, like Lee, many of us here on Sputnik, we're experts on this because we've studied it. However, it's like we don't feel like we're experts because we still have things we need to learn, and we know we have to learn. And then you have the other side where they got a 60-second summation via Fox News or CNN, and now they think they're the experts. And it's like, no, it should be the opposite, but it is a dichotomy and like the psychology of it that's so interesting to me in all of this. And then not only that, you know, you have a lot of, for example, on a lot of my tweets, there's sometimes where I'll interact with the trolls just to kind of, you know, see what's out there. And, you know, some of them will be like, how can you support a country that invades? And I go, you're right. I don't support when the United States invaded Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen. I didn't support that either. And they're like, oh, that's whataboutism. And I say, exactly. For example, do you realize that we've been bombing the hell out of Yemen, literally sending it back to the Stone Age? We can't get oil. Saudi Arabia finally picks up the phone and says, hey, we'll give you oil, but give us bombs. We're getting ready to bomb Yemen again, back to the Stone Age, what was even before the Stone Age now. And no one's talking about that. And they're like, well, it's the whataboutism with all of it. And it's like, no, you're proving to me that you're only watching either one channel for a certain amount of time. And it's not a whataboutism, it's that you're not informed. Because if you were mad, this angry about Ukraine, then you should be really angry about Yemen and Afghanistan and all these other countries that weren't, quote, civilized, which white reporters actually said that on live television. That, oh, I can't believe this is happening in Europe. This is so civilized. It's like, do you hear yourself? You're not even saying the quiet part out loud. You're blasting it. And it's shocking to me living in a world today. I feel like every other day, now with Facebook and YouTube banning Radio Sputnik, it's like, I feel like we're either living on an episode of Black Mirror, or we're in the middle of V for Vendetta, or we're in Stranger Things and we're in the upside down world. It's bananas to be living in a time like this. And unfortunately, the people that are on the right side of history, they're shutting down our voices for a reason. And it's very scary, because we had a great guest this morning where I asked him, what do people think about, you're overseas, it was Elijah, I can't pronounce his last name correctly, but if you look on the Fault Line show, and I asked him, what do people say about Americans over there besides that we wear Wrangler jeans and say yeehaw? And he's like, everybody says, if that's what their democracy looks like, we don't want it. And we are literally democracy in name only. We don't practice it, which is very scary, because we just sanctioned India because they didn't do what we wanted them to do. And that's the largest democracy in the world. I mean, can you see the hypocrisy? It is so thick in every single situation. And as an American, as a patriot, I have that right to question my government and the decisions that it's making. And right now, we don't have the right people in office making the right decisions.
That was the entire purpose of the Bill of Rights, to preserve the individual rights of the people against the collectivized nationalist state, because they have infinite resources and we have very limited resources. And the purpose of the U.S. Constitution was to put a throttle on democracy. There's some things the people can't have, even if they really want it. The people should not be able to have censorship. Congress shall make no law. To me, from my libertarian roots, means literally, Congress shall make no law. And take the most hideous thing you think of, and I'm going to argue a newspaper about that can exist. You don't have to read it. That's the way I look at it. And so, yes, I agree with Faran 100% on that. I always have to inject a little prog rock in my political economy, and the originators of prog rock, by my judgment, King Crimson, wrote a song called Epitaph, and there's a lyric in it that has a few lines, and it's, knowledge is a deadly friend when no one sets the rules. The fate of all mankind, I fear, is in the hand of fools. And that's my worry.
Yes.
If I felt I had competent leadership, I don't have to get everything I want. All I need is to feel and judge that, okay, I'm not getting this, I'm not getting that, but I see the other side. I can see why they want to do that, but nothing seems to make any sense. And yet their response isn't to address my objections or my confusion, it's to tell me I'm crazy, that I shouldn't even be feeling and thinking this way.
And, when we talk about democracy, I was going to say, can you tell I come from a family of constitutional lawyers? That, for example, back in 2003, I had a monologue on this on Tuesday, and I talked about this because I love bringing in ideas for my monologues that people didn't know happened in history. And back in 2003, when France vetoed us invading Iraq, not only were we changing our French fries to freedom fries, our medical journals were actually blocking French scientists, doctors, and researchers from publishing their new research and findings in the American medical medicine journals. For example, like JAMA, for the New England Journal of Medicine, they were boycotting French doctors. And while we were boycotting French doctors, that year they had come out with so many different scientific findings and what have you when it came to surgery and medicine, that the UK medical journals were publishing French articles like crazy. We were hindering our medical community and innocent lives and innocent doctors who wanted to find the next best things. You know, my father was a neurosurgeon and a lawyer, but, you know, he has all of his JAMA journals from the time he was in medical school, because these journals are things that doctors give to each other to, like, you know, it's like passing notes. Hey, I perfected the suture. Here's how you can do it. We were hindering our own medical community here because France didn't agree with us about Iraq. Are you kidding me? And that's the thing, is if Americans knew how far we go sometimes to silence people strictly because they don't do what we tell them to do, that's not democracy. Last I checked, that's a dictatorship or authoritarianism, you know, like what they say Putin is. I mean, the hypocrisy, again, is just so thick. I could go on and on. We could have a whole nother hour about it, but, you know, it's really sad when you start seeing this in real time as well, not just from our past.
I agree.
Yeah, let me talk about authoritarianism for a second, because we're almost out of time. I want to point out that I tend to be a libertarian-leaning conservative, and sometimes leaning so far that I fall over. I'm very libertarian. I'm more libertarian than conservative, but and I'm quick to say that I'm anti-communist, and I am, but I'm not anti-communist, because a lot of my favorite people and a lot of my favorite guests are commies, and George Galloway is one of them.
But you should be talking to them. You should be talking to them. Not
Absolutely, you should be talking to them. Yeah.
And I had a thought as to why I like a lot of them. A lot of them are communists, you know, Ted Rall, who's on the show all the time, but they're not authoritarians.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say establishment liberals, Democrats, are more authoritarian than communists. I really mean it. It's shocking,
yes,
but true. Have you found it to be true? And talk about your interview with Galloway.
Yes, when I was talking with George, you know, I've known him for a while, since I've been at RT, and here's how you know we're authoritarian. We are sitting here waiting on bated breath for Congress to pass this, but oh no, Senator Joe Manchin doesn't like it this time, and he's like basically holding up a bill. And then you have Joe Biden, where it's like, where is he? Is he going to come out and talk about this? And then you have Dr. Fauci, who mysteriously disappears when all these biolabs pop up in Ukraine. The fact that we have to wait for these leaders to come out and they're not, it's almost like a narcissistic, like these narcissistic trolls that we have running our government, where they're gaslighting us and saying, no, sit back down. It's fine. We got this. And it's like, you clearly don't got this. Everybody's looking at us like we're a clown show. And, you know, so when we were talking to George Galloway, you know, we were discussing just kind of how the United States is so war hungry, especially after Afghanistan. And if you remember, they wanted, after America's Vietnam, they wanted Afghanistan to be Russia's Vietnam. Now I think they want Ukraine to be Russia's Afghanistan, because it's like, if we don't look so good, if you don't look so good, then we don't look so bad, kind of a thing with Russia. And with George, though,
the music's on. We have to get out because top of the hour. Fantastic having you on. Let's have you on again real soon. Congratulations on being over at Fault Lines here on Sputnik, just in time for us to be banned by YouTube. But okay. But anyway, Faran, let's have you come back on again soon. We got a short break. Then we'll come back with more of the best damn radio show in the world. This is The Backstory.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are back. It's the final hour of the week on the best damn talk show in the world, The Backstory. I'm investigative journalist Lee Stranahan. We are joined by co-host Mark Frost. This is a free speech zone. This is The Backstory. Want again, thank Faran and follow her Twitter feed. Make sure you do that. And check out her website if you get a chance. It's really enjoyable. I was looking at it earlier. A lot of good articles over there. And especially in this time of censorship, talking about issues like the censorship of the film revealing Ukraine. And coming up this hour, we're going to close out the week, close out the hour with Scotty Nell Hughes, another newswoman. There we go. On The Backstory. Hey, Mark, so do me a favor. Why don't you pick up the point you were making about sanctions? Because I think this is really important. I was thinking about this. Aside from all the negatives, they're not working. Can someone say realistically, they're just not working? The EU came out the other day and said, we can't sanction anymore. We've reached the limit of what we can do. And once you've pulled out all the stops on the sanctions and they're not working, Russia's not slowing down the military attack one bit due to sanctions. In fact, they're sanctioning back. And now Russia is saying they're not going to export a number of raw materials around the world, Mark. You saw that, right?
Absolutely.
Now, and I'll put it like this. What do you think of the idea in general that Russia has built a fairly self-sufficient economy? They have no debt to speak of. They have no massive debt. You know what I'm saying? Like this country. What do you think of that philosophy of somewhat economic self-sufficiency? Mark?
I don't like it because it's, from a political economic perspective, maybe, from a political perspective, it might work. But let me tackle the first part that you said first. The reason sanctions don't work, let's do a thought experiment real quick. George W. Bush, unlike his father in the earlier Gulf War, arbitrarily chose to take the United States into an invasion of Iraq. We invaded a sovereign country. Is that a reasonable, factual thing to say?
Yes.
Right? So we absolutely invaded a sovereign country. And so let's just do a thought experiment on that. What if Russia would have, or France or whoever would have put sanctions on us? Would that have stopped us from going in, or would that have just pissed us off and made us want to go in even harder? My view is that it has the latter impact, generally speaking. It doesn't really work, especially if it's something really desired. And while it's not working, the people that are suffering for it are the people who are the least able, the people who suffer the most are the people who are least able to afford it. So, for instance, when we were putting sanctions on China, all that did was enrich China at the expense of American consumers. And it's the same thing with any sort of sanction. I was against the sanctions for Cuba, and I don't think anybody is more anti-communist as far as governments go than I am. I don't even think you are, Lee. I can't stand communism, both in theory and in practice. Just can't stand it. It doesn't mean I don't understand it. I've read every word that Karl Marx has ever written that I'm aware of. But it's not my thing. But that's my bias, right? That's my confession of bias. But at the end of the day, you know, even with that just little thought experiment, we can pretty clearly see that doesn't work. Or we can go look at empirical data, which people like me and lots of other economists have done, and we look at, okay, what has been the impact of sanctions? Let's look at Cuba. Oh my goodness, that's like a poster boy for sanctions. Did we get the result that we wanted in Cuba from sanctions? No. We actually entrenched Castro's control. We entrenched Castro's ability to keep his government in play, and we also entrenched the ability of that government to not allow change to happen. Now let's flip the coin. What if we do trade with people? If we trade with people, we change them. You get changed by the people you do business with. You just do. You pick up things from them. They pick up some things from you. You see that they're not evil, horrible, hideous people. They see that you're not. Trade is the best way to avoid war. You trade with people, and once you start trading with people, it makes sense. A famous economist called Ricardo talked about the equivalence and how international trade allows us to take the best that we're able to produce and exchange it with the best that our trading partners are able to produce. And it makes a giant difference with respect to how we're going to interact with those people down the road. And if you look at Cuba, if we would have been trading with Cuba, I think Castro would have been thrown out by his own people. But we didn't do that. What we did was we allowed, and it also, by the way, sanctions, literally, from a political perspective, the only solution once sanctions have been thrown on you, let me put myself in Putin's position. Okay, the whole world, or a lot of the world, is wanting to throw sanctions. People are doing the virtue signaling. Companies are saying, well, we're going to stop doing business in Russia and all that kind of stuff. And, once they do that, it isn't going to produce hardly any results, because all it's going to do is, if I was him, it's going to strengthen my resolve to become even more self-sufficient. And what we end up doing is isolating our enemies to the point where war becomes eventually inevitable. That's the problem with sanctions. And if you need a great example for it, look at the sanctions on the Japanese in the 1930s. We were taking action in a war way before we declared war. So I'm glad, I'm a proud American. I'm glad we won it. I wanted to win it. I supported the nuclear bombs I support the nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But make no mistake, we pushed the Japanese into attacking us. There's just no other way to say it. We were sending American troops to China, the Flying Tigers, reflagging them, so to speak, and they were killing Japanese. By long-standing sort of standards of international relations, that's considered a legitimate act of war. And I would think we would learn from it, or at least take a pause before we just reflexively go there, and we would at least learn from the things that we've done in the past. Also, Americans have to pay for this too. We already have an energy policy by this administration that's absurd, and now we have another energy policy because of the Ukrainian situation that's equally as absurd. And we have the working poor here that now, instead of spending $25 to fill up their tank or $30 to fill up their tank, they have to spend $60 or $70. And for people on fixed, limited, low discretionary incomes, that's a tax on American citizens, and I don't like it. And I wish. Okay. I wish. And Mark. Yeah, sorry.
I want to get to. We got Owl Killer and David. We'll get to you in 1 second. But did you notice that Russia has said it's going to nationalize some of these businesses that are shutting down their business in Russia? Russia's going to nationalize them. Did you see that?
Yes, I did see that. I hope they don't do that. If I was their advisor, if I was the person that was advising, I would say don't do that because it's just another escalation. But it's certainly understandable why somebody would want to do that. It's a tit for tat. That's what escalation is. It's tit for tat. You just keep upping it and upping it and upping it. And then finally, people run out of things to up it with, and that's when war starts. War is the ultimate act of politics.
And let me just say that I hope they do it if they listen to my idea. Here's what my idea is. And I think this is a brilliant idea, but I always do. So if you're going to nationalize companies that shut down Mr. Putin, I say this with all due respect. Here's my advice. Nationalize the Coke factories, the Coca-Cola factories. You know, Coke and Pepsi are shutting down. Then turn them into Comrade Cola. Hear me out, Mark. Comrade Cola. And what Comrade Cola will be made with is pure, no high fructose corn syrup, pure Cuban cane sugar. Because you know the Mexican cola is very popular because it's made with real sugar, right?
Yes, yes.
So you use your trading partner, use Cuba cane sugar. I'm sure they make some good sugar there, and then call it Comrade Cola. There's a whole marketing campaign. What do you think, Mark? That would be a big seller, I think.
Well, it's like freedom fries, right? And so you know what I mean. But your humorous point actually drives home a very very important principle of economics. When you trade with people, both sides are made better off. When you refuse to trade with people, you become increasingly suspicious of each other. There's nothing that ties you together. Why is it that France and Britain don't fight each other anymore? Pretty obvious. They trade with each other. The price of going to war, they don't like each other. Most Brits I know make fun of the French, and the French make fun of the Brits, but they're not going to war anymore. And that's because they're tied together, they're intertwined on an economic basis. Probably the reason China and the United States haven't gone to war yet. We're too economically intertwined together, and it's impossible to unwind all the spaghetti. And what we're doing right now isn't just a slippery slope. We're actually escalating what could be happening, because if you go to the war college or if you just study war in general, unless you want absolute obliteration, you have to give your enemy an out. You have to give your enemy a chance. Let me say, you have to give your opponent a face-saving way to live, whether it's an American, whether it's a Russian, whether it's a Brit. And the hubris of this administration seems to be that it isn't. And what I'm worried about is I don't have any problem with the administration saying it's our policy, we favor Ukraine. There's no problem with that, in my view. And we're going to do what we can diplomatically to stop this conflict. But we're not doing that. We're actively arming an opponent of an enemy, which makes us the enemy. And that's what worries me. And when people start getting hot-headed, and Biden and Putin are not robots, they're human beings, it's a recipe for that slippery slope I've been talking about and that descent into absolute disaster. And we can avoid it now. There's still room to avoid it.
And I will use a segue that makes no sense, but I will have a slippery slope into an absolute owl killing. Here's where we go. We're going to go to the phones, 202-521-1320. Owl killer, what is it on your mind?
Well, So first off, you had a great segment the other day with Alex Jones. I already got the
Thank you.
From listening to you, but it brings it to his audience, which is very, very large. I do agree with your guest because you have some throughout history where you get currency wars, trade wars, and then world war. And it's funny because in The Godfather 2, and one of the ending scenes, which is it's a flashback in time, the consigliere Tom Hagen says to Sonny, "We should have expected it when we cut off the Japanese oil supply." So it just that's just that's a we don't support what the Japanese did, but like your guest said, that we did kind of push them into making a move. It was either they were going to have to accept that they couldn't go any further, or they were going to have to make a move and attack us. One thing I do want to say though is, again, I'm going to bring up the Great Reset tied into this whole Russia situation. Every problem where you talk about where Russia is self-sufficient, we have done the opposite with the deindustrialization, and we've made it sexy with the electric cars and everything else. And we've sold it as, oh, we're doing this for the environment. But what we've done, when you just look at our policies, whether it's our shutting down the Keystone oil pipeline, or whether it's going to 30% windmill in Texas that has more energy than they know what to do with, and then they create the issue where they had the grid collapse because they decided that they wanted to, virtue signal to the leftist cause and start putting up the wind farms, and they ended up dealing with the consequences of their actions. So what I see going on right now is, in order for them to get their Great Reset, they need whether our inflation, the food prices, the oil prices, we need somebody to blame it on. And Vladimir Putin is that scapegoat right now. But everything we've done to ourselves are all self-inflicted wounds, where if we do lose the reserve currency, overnight lives are going to change. And I think that's where you're going to own nothing and you're going to like it.
And I think that it's a good point. And I think people need to understand how globalism ties into anti-Russianism. There's not a word really, but anti-Russianism ties into globalism directly. And there's about a million ways. But let me just ask, since we got Mark Frost on, do you think we're going to lose the reserve currency? Not reserve the lose currency. Lose the reserve currency.
This year or next year? No. But this is what I'm talking about in terms of unintended consequences, because let's make sure that all the listeners understand what a reserve currency is. All it just simply means is that it comes from the concept of the theory of hegemonic stability. In an anarchy of nations, you have to have one nation that's sort of the coordinator. And, that's... So the reserve currency is a demand gift. 1/2 of all demand for U.S. dollars is outside of the United States. Half. So if you pushed a button and it magically stopped overnight, you would have 50% more dollars. You would have 50% excess dollars in circulation. And that would plummet the dollar. I mean, the dollar would just plummet because you have all these excess dollars. Because there's more dollars being held outside the United States than in the United States. And it's always been our great benefit after World War II. After Bretton Woods, the United States has always benefited for a unusually high demand for the U.S. dollar. And that's what's propped up our ability to borrow so much money, because we are the reserve currency, we are a safe haven, and it is a risk to every American if that is lost. And it would be, I agree with the caller, it would be an economically catastrophic loss if it happened, especially if it happens quickly, because I'm not even exactly sure how. I'd have to sit down and think of even how to combat it, because you can't print money anymore. You're not the reserve currency. The demand for your currency is drastically lower, and the demand for somebody else's currency is drastically higher. So you can't borrow like you used to. The Fed can't print like it used to, or at least not without impunity. And yeah, it's a financial nuke is what it basically is. And so it is something that the United States needs to be aware of. And not even just be aware of, but it is something that I think is a huge, possible, massive cost with respect to an unintended consequence. No, loyal leader of the United States is going to wake up and say, I'm going to destroy our, reserve currency status. But it's the incompetence that follows as an unintended consequence from their choices about something else that cause it.
Okay, want to quickly go to calls, 202-521-1320, and it's a time alert. Central Time, it is 4:20. Anyone who needs to know that, you've been notified. Let's go to David in New York. I don't know why you said that, but you can figure it out or not. David in New York, go ahead.
Hi, yes. I have two comments, but first, before the two comments, I'd like to disagree with Mark on one thing. With respect to Russia's desire to be self-sufficient, I think or mostly self-sufficient economically, they saw this coming years ago. I mean, they could have easily foreseen a NATO-U.S. economic war against them, and so they had to do this. Otherwise, when it happened, they'd be really in trouble. That's the first thing. Okay, so that's a disagreement. But let me make my two comments first, so that you can respond to that. My first comment is that what Putin should do to preserve the economic health of the average Russian citizen, and I'm sure he's certainly considered things like this, okay, is put price caps, immediate price caps on energy, housing costs, and food. In other words, basically subsidize the cost of necessities, absolute necessities, so that people, the lower end of the economic spectrum in Russia doesn't suffer so severely. I don't think we could say the same thing about America. I doubt that Biden would dare put on price caps on essential goods. That's my first comment. My second comment, this is maybe even more important, is that with all this rhetoric, warmongering, the risk of an actual shooting war is actually really there. It's unfortunate, but it really is there. And so, if I were Putin, I would at least say this, because he can't prevent the possibility of a shooting war. If it happens, it happens. But he should announce this, and I really hope he does. What he should say is, if war breaks out, we will not be the first to employ nuclear weapons. We will not be the first to employ nuclear weapons. That's for the health of the whole world. I don't know if the U.S. or NATO would agree to say the same thing, but at least Putin should publicly make that announcement that in the case of a shooting war, we will not use nuclear weapons. Those are my two comments. I'll leave it back to you.
Yeah, sorry, Lee. Did you want to say something?
I just want to keep it quick because we got like 3 callers on the line. So go ahead, Mark. Just make a quick comment.
We tried price controls in 1972. I believe what was it? 72? Yeah, 72 or 3. Nixon did
sounds
them.
Right.
Price and wage controls, massive disaster. It actually amplified the inflation. It was a disaster of epic proportions. So I agree. I doubt Biden would ever do it. On that note, because it just doesn't do much. It goes back to you can't just put price limits on something if you have private producers of things. That's how you end up with shortages, and it's almost impossible for a government to plan all that out. So that's my comment on that. But I understand why why folks are thinking about those sorts of things. But I would I would add that to Biden's list of blunders if he did price controls.
Yeah, let's quickly go to Keith. Keith, what is on your mind?
Hey, Lee. Hi, Mark. You guys have a great show. I recently found you guys through Jason Goodman.
Oh.
I have a question. I want to make sure my thinking is in line. When you look at Schwab and his goals, it seems to me that he has the West pretty well under control. His remain after Trump, so before Trump was removed or lost the election, he had 3 problems. He had Trump, he had China, and he had Russia. Trump's gone. Now, say what you want. There are some strange irregularities going on. Whether that is real or not, I can't comment on that. But my question is this Plan B? Meaning they're taking advantage of the pandemic, didn't quite work out. Is this their Plan B? The reason I think that is why in the heck are we pushing and pushing and pushing for this?
Well, and it's very clear. If you look up Vladimir Zelensky World Economic Forum, he spoke at the World Economic Forum and is introduced by Schwab a couple of years ago. So I think there's an argument to be made there. It's hard to know. I tend to think they're that good at planning things out that they're like, okay, this isn't working. I think they've been pushing this Ukraine thing for a long time, and that they didn't just come up with it as a Plan B, like pandemic's not working, let's do this, because they've been working on it so long. But I think they do follow the philosophy of never let a good crisis go to waste. But I don't think that means they create every crisis. 202-521-1320. Debbie, what is on your mind?
Hi there, gentlemen. What I'm hearing is fear. Okay, and I think fear can be really disabling us to really think clearly. Now, the petrodollar has been abused. It has blackmailed other countries. Serbia came out and stated that they were forced at the United Nations to sign sanctions, or they didn't sanction, but to sign, yeah, I think they did, with other countries, that they were threatened that the Western financial people would pull money out of their factories. And I had listened to people from France that was on a news organization, and he was stating that they are looking at going around the petrodollar because this is affecting everybody. And we're not talking about people that got lots of money. We're talking about the average Joe, Jane Doe that's going to be affected. Knights Templar International on their Perch TV was talking about today about how, the wheat, because the wheat comes from Russia and also from Ukraine, that loaves of bread are going to be very expensive. And that's just a small example. But the thing that the Frenchman said was that this petrodollar is used and that the CIA monitors what business transactions are going between countries and this. And it's the same thing when they sanctioned Turkey. Turkey went and had everybody sell off the petrodollar in their country and go to their lira. So I don't think, and right now the two countries that the Great Reset, or however you want to describe them, is that they cannot control Russia and China. They're both individual countries, and they operate under their own thing. Now, with Russia going into the two independents, because that's the way they recognize it, was that this genocide was coming, and they knew it, and they stopped it. Now, what's really upsetting me, even angrier, is that they've taken the Orthodox Church YouTube channel offline. Now, what in God's world are these people thinking all the time? And so what they're doing is they're closing off everybody so we can't have a free flow of information, make informed decisions from both sides. And this goes back to the 1980s when the Soviet Union states, I'm not talking about Russia individually, but their states, their satellite states, were crushed by economic terrorism, and that's what I call this. Now, Russia is not out to get...
Debbie, I just got another call. I got to take it. A lot of great points there. Thanks for calling. Really appreciate it. Al, let's cover you and then go to the break after Al.
Hey, guys.
Al.
Hey, guys. Thank you so much. Great show. Outstanding topics. Great ideas. Great minds. I'll just make a couple of points. I'll piggyback on a couple of things that different callers said. Vladimir Putin is not he doesn't play checkers. He plays chess. And if any one of us on this line have watched a chess tournament before, there's perfect decorum, quietness, and calmness in the ball when chess players are playing. You anticipate 8 or 10 moves ahead of your opponent. What is being set up is, to be honest, this is great power politics. There would not be a quote-unquote thermonuclear war. This, what's going to happen, the reason why Putin and the Russian Federation are very cool and calm and very easy on their counter-sanctions is because they already know the EU is going to break up. The citizens of the EU are going to revolt. The Europeans can protest in a way that Americans do not have even the smallest inclination in protesting. That's going to happen. Number two, withdrawing the dollar from Russia, like the previous caller talked about with the world reserve currency, there's going to be an oversupply of dollars, which will be a self-inflicted wound for massive inflation in the U.S. It's inevitable. The Germans, they're hanging over the barrel because if Russia decides counter-sanctions against the Germans, their entire economy will shut down, including transport. Borrell, the EU foreign commissioner, has already played his hand. He said that they've done all that they could do on sanctions. Vladimir is going to wait them out to see everything crumble. He's not going to allow the Ukrainians to resupply. He will wait until the Azov and the neo-Nazis will turn on the other guys, and the professional military will launch or implement a coup and take over and ask for Russian help to go after the neo-Nazis. That's how this will end. And NATO will break up. Why? Because it will be clearly demonstrated that the strength of Russia withheld.
Well, and let me say something now. A lot of very interesting points there. So many great points from all the callers. Want to thank Keith, Deb. Wait, who else do we have? David. Before I just got to go back and think. And Owl Killer. So many great points today. So many great calls. Al, let me just amplify one thing you're saying. I think the U.S. showed complete disrespect for the EU that indicated the EU was on their way out. When Victoria Nuland, that big mouth yapper, came out and said, F the EU, that showed the U.S., that's the U.S. saying, we don't care about you, EU. So the U.S. already showed disrespect for the EU 8 years ago. And it was public. And it was kind of like I'll use a brave analogy, like the pretty girl slapping you at a party. You don't come back from that, except there's no pretty girl here in this analogy. But 202-521-1320, great calls. And coming up next at the end of the week here, the end of the broadcast week, coming up, Scotty Nell Hughes joining us as our final guest of the week with Mark Frost as our guest host. This is the backstory.
Stuck in traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime.
Like beer? Yeah, we drank beer.
Whoever's in charge, and I want to record it.
Talk about that.
Discussing all the controversies and news across the disunited states of America. Tune in to Fault Lines every weekday from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern, only on Radio Sputnik.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Hi, I'm political analyst Garland Nixon.
And I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon.
We're the co-hosts for The Critical Hour, airing Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C.
We close out your day with a thorough and hard-hitting analysis of the day's top stories, where we bring in brilliant scholars, authors, and investigative journalists from around the world.
And on Fridays, it's panel time, when we do a roundup of the week's most important issues.
Join us to keep up with the world's top stories.
Enjoy an in-depth analysis.
And have a little fun along the way. Listen to our show,
The Critical Hour, Monday through Fridays on Radio Sputnik.
We are back. The backstory. Investigative journalist Lee Stranahan. And we're at the end of our broadcast week here at last half hour of the show with our guest, Scotty Nell Hughes, and our co-host, Mark Frost. So first off, let me say hi to Scotty. Hi, Scotty.
Oh, hi, Lee. How are you doing? How's your week going in this beautiful land of liberty and freedom that our founding fathers set up for us so many decades ago?
Well, I'll tell you how it's going. I'm in the beautiful land of freedom where it's 6 degrees out. So, chilly is how it's going. But I was actually talking about you today, Scotty, behind your back. And I was using you as an example because you and I have known each other a long time. Let's talk about local politics and national politics. And let's start with, I have a feeling, because you and I have known each other a long time. We met, I think the first time we met was at CPAC, correct? Met face to face.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And we have let me talk about a headline that's happened in the past 24 hours. You've had the budget bill, the multi-trillion-dollar budget bill, along with massive amount of money for Ukraine, massive amount, passed the bipartisan majority Senate, and so many Republican senators voted for this abomination of a bill, from people like Chuck Grassley to people like John Thune from here in South Dakota. And I really think a lot of Republicans, and give me your sense of this, a lot of Republicans are itching to get rid of some of these rhinos. I'll put it like that. But no one's giving them the political organizational skills to take out these. I think someone like Mitch McConnell, the fact that he is hated, I think, among Republican grassroots people. Do you get the same sense? Mitch McConnell, they don't have any respect for Mitch.
I don't think they have any respect for Mitch, but I don't know who hates who. I used to think that the Republicans hated George Soros, but the last 2 weeks has confused me, as most Republicans are spouting their same talking points. So I can't tell you right now who hates you, and if a hate is anything that can't be just changed within 5 minutes.
Well, but my sense in the grassroots, I agree with that. But I don't think we have any way of telling what the grassroots think. Because when I talk to people individually, I see people on Twitter, for instance, on social media, waking up in larger and larger numbers. I'm seeing the film I'm in, Revealing Ukraine, blowing up on Gab, for instance. And it's those people, the liberty-loving people, and they really are. You go back to the Tea Party movement, correct?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. For you and I first really met each other, we battled.
That's right.
And we realized we were fighting for the same. We were fighting for the same teams, but it was the same goal.
No, that's right. And my sense is the Tea Party people became largely the deplorables, and now they've become what I will call the great rejects. They become the people who are rejecting the globalist agenda. And the great rejects, you see them at school board meetings. You see them out protesting, supporting the truck convoy. You see them out protesting against mask mandates. These are people who become Tea Party people, but even more activists. And they've gotten very skeptical of a lot of this stuff. I don't think those people who were the Trump base, I think that they are questioning the Ukraine narrative, and they see how virtue signaling it is, and they see how unanimous it's got to be. And when I talk to people are telling me they're sick of it, but they don't have any political representation in Washington. That's what I think. What do you say?
Lee, I want to agree with you, and it has been, I have to tell you, I thought that the mandates and the COVID and the lockdown, because you and I were on that same side going, guys, yes, there's a virus, but this is not the right way to respond. We were saying this years ago, 2 years ago. In fact, today was the first time that the basketball team walked out and said, we're not playing because of COVID. So really, the pandemic lockdown started 2 years to today, and here we are 2 years later, and guess what's happening? The same thing. It's like the people are once again, even after already being shown all of the falsehoods and all of the narratives and all of the agenda that the COVID lockdowns and mandates have done, here we're seeing it happen again. And yes, while I like to believe that eyes are being opened, it is still just shocking me. The people, including especially the politicians, the Tea Party politicians, the Ted Cruz's, Marco Rubio, we lost him a long time ago, but all of these Tea Parties, now I have to say, Dan Crenshaw's, Tom Cotton, even though Tom's a little bit iffy on this, that they are falling for the same line and people are falling behind him. The Sean Hannity coming out and say that we need to kill a world leader who happens to have more nukes than we do. And Sean Hannity has always been one of those conservative voices. This is the thing right now that I cannot wrap my head around, Lee, is why are they, those that have the position, that have the microphones in front of them, are they scared that they are next? Hence why the way that they're acting and to why they're buying into this, let's, pray for Ukraine. Now, and you and I have had this conversation. Yes, this is affecting the people on the ground. So, yes, we need to pray for the people of Ukraine, but also pray for the people of Russia. They're suffering too. Everybody in this war is suffering, and conservatives are just as much putting up there. The Franklin Grahams putting Samaritan's Purse, doing fundraisers right behind. I mean, I find it very interesting that the same week that all of this global fundraising campaign for Ukraine happened, the Clinton Global Initiative magically started up because they felt they had a need. Lee, it is so easy to read and so easy to see, but even conservatives, ones that I think would know, could see it, they're still toting the George Soros, we need to get in there, that Ukraine is this wonderful, amazing, virtuous country free of all things that could be anything harmful to others. And they're doing it, Lee. And I have to say, this is the first time that I've been very, very frustrated with our own movement. I'd expect this from the Democrats. I would not expect this from conservatives, even those Tea Party Trump bases. There's a video circulating today. Even Trump said, keep on fighting, Ukraine. And I'm going, you know better. It's like even he's buying into the narrative, the same narrative that basically lost him the election because he went along with the Fauci progressive talking points in handling COVID. This is very frustrating to me, Lee, I must admit to you.
Well, Trump did never get it. He didn't get it, period. The fact that he was, look, it's obvious the Ukrainians were trying to take out Trump in 2016. Petro Poroshenko was trying to take him out, and the second impeachment was by the Ukrainians. Trump has never gotten this. He doesn't seem to get, he surrounds himself with Judases continually. Continually he does. And I'll say, have you heard of Allison Hayden, Scotty Nell?
I have not. I need to look.
Okay, look up Allison Hayden, Hayden. I had her on the show earlier in the week. she's running against Eric Swalwell in the for the representation, the congressional seat for Alameda County, California. Okay? She is a stalwart Republican running against him, and she gets it. She completely gets it. She was looking around going, wait, why are Republicans supporting? When I look at who's on this side, you're on the same side as Soros? What? Did you see? This is so disgusting. But it's perfect of our age. There's a comedian's benefit with all the comedians. That horrible Trevor Noah from The Daily Show. Oh, he's awful. And you know, Stephen Colbert and John Oliver are doing a benefit for Ukraine. And it's got the most apt title in the world. It's called This Will Not Be Funny. And that is, they could have that as their slogan, all of them. But this is virtue signaling Democrats. That's who you're on the same side of. If you're supporting Ukraine, if you're staunch supporter of Ukraine, you're literally on the side of not just Nazis, that's bad enough, but worse than Nazis, virtue signaling Democrats. And Scotty, Allison Hayden is someone who's running for office, but is taking the same kind of stance that I think you would like and be proud of. But you have to show a tremendous amount of bravery. But I think we need more brave candidates. Mark, do you have a question for Scotty Nell Hughes?
I agree with everything she said. It's like, it's like we both came from the same, political factory or something. So I, especially when she got fired up, it's what has me so riled. I think you said it really well, Lee, when you said, is Ukraine becoming the new mask as far as virtue signaling goes? And it bothers me. And the level of hypocrisy around it is insane. I just realized, by the way, I don't know if it was before I was on YouTube earlier, just maybe 2 o'clock on the Fault Lines page. It's down now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it says this is not available in this country.
Nice. What country are we available in?
I actually took a screenshot. Let me see exactly what it says. It says, this channel is not available in your country.
Yeah, nice. So there you go.
So they must have done that while this show's been going on. So.
Well, hold on. They're doing something because I'm on a chat group with the R2 America group, and we're all kind of going through the same thing right now. And they did something within the last few minutes to R2 America as well, but then they put it back up. But
let me refresh.
Well, what they did is they're erasing it from the web, and then it's back up, but they only left the slugs that have nothing, anything with Russian in it. So they put it back up, but then they went through and they eliminated certain episodes, certain segments, certain groups. So they're playing with it. There's no doubt. But that right there shows what kind of country we live in. I mean, Lee and your wonderful co-host, freedom of the press, freedom of speech in America. Those are just words right now on an old piece of parchment paper sitting in a museum under a bunch of glass because we don't have it right now. And you have seen the government, and this has been, and we've always said that COVID was a trial. Before that was Black Lives Matter. And then we see that the truckers, we have given the globalists the perfect formula to have control of the population and society. We've done it. We've shown them that they can put pressure on the banks to cancel out accounts of people that they disagree with. We have shown them they can have people fired from their jobs if they do not follow the government's control. Even when later on it's shown that the government's knowledge is wrong, doesn't matter if people don't get their jobs back, and you don't get to sue the government for their misinformation. Now we're finding that they are shutting off those voices. And here's the best part. That's what I keep telling people. It's not the government's fault. You as a person, this just shows how much trust the government has in the people's thought. Because what it is, you have this thing called a power button that you can turn your TV off, turn your radio. I'm sorry, that is my German Shepherd. You can turn your TV off. You can turn your radio off. But the government does not believe you will do that. The government believes that you will continue to listen to great voices like Lee Stranahan. You will continue to read Twitter feeds like Faran Fronczak and Cassandra Fairbanks and, oddly enough, AJ Delgado in it. And they don't want you to do that. They don't believe. They don't want you to hear it. And it's not because they say it's under propaganda and they believe misinformation. If it was misinformation, then you would call it out, that people would have enough sense. They don't want to read you to read it because they're afraid you're going to realize that's the truth.
But but in the nature of conciliation, and if you can't beat them, join them, and making money, let me tell you about an idea I have. I was going to do I was going to relaunch Citizen Journalism School this weekend, but instead what I think I'm going to do is launch a website called Mask for Ukraine. Here's what it is. It's a mask with the Ukrainian flag on it. And what we're going to say is, sure, the CDC says you don't have to wear a mask, but won't you wear one for Ukraine? And it will be a mask for people who want to show their virtue. We're not claiming any medical benefit whatsoever because the CDC has been very clear. There is no. But if you want to wear a mask for Ukraine, we will supply them to you for the low price of $19.95. I'm just saying. And then I'll get some orphan children to paint masks for Ukraine. I got to figure it out because cheap labor, that's important. But have we reached a point where that would work, Scotty? Where purely virtue signaling, no necessary medical reason, because it's you're. By the way, isn't it funny how the war cured COVID? No one's giving Vladimir Putin enough credit. He cured COVID. No one's talking about it anymore, are they, Scotty?
No, they're not. And that right there is because the truth was Joe Biden was losing COVID. I still see today as I walked around, and I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, there was just as many this week wearing masks as there was last week and the week before, and the week before, and the week before. There are still people wearing masks, which means there's still a fear of this COVID that is out there. There is still people being affected of COVID, and Joe Biden was losing that argument. And, Lee, you and I both watched this for the last 3 weeks. But now I guess we're going on week 4 of it, and I think neither one of us thought that we would actually see what we have going into it. And what gets me, this is what makes me the angriest of everything going on. Time and time again, you are seeing coming out of Ukraine, false story out of false story out of false story out of false story. Then you find out about the biolab admitted by the Democrat herself that was in charge of the program. That's been scrubbed. All of this is scrubbed, and yet today the new narrative has been, well, there's going to be a chemical warfare attack that Vladimir Putin's going to do because that's what he did in Syria, which, once again, these are people that have never followed history. They've never actually looked into it because I get it. It's complicated. It's not your big backyard. It doesn't have to do with anything in your local newspaper, so you don't know what's going on. So you take what they say and say, ooh, there was a chemical warfare coming. That is what is scary to me, Lee, is that we still continue to believe, despite being for some reason lied to over and over and over again, these same people, the comedians, the newspapers, the conservatives, the Democrats, the Soros lights, they still continue to follow and push this narrative, and it just does more damage. And it's so damaging that, God forbid, a single ounce of Russian blood is spilled as violently happens here on American soil. It is on their hands because it's being allowed, it's being encouraged, everything is happening right now on purpose, and it's scary, it's sad. And I have to tell you, Lee, I cannot believe this is happening to this country. This has nothing to do with whether this goes far beyond even the battle between Ukraine and Russia, which, by the way, if anybody. I love these people that I guess they Google and they read a WikiLeaks article and they feel like they're experts on Ukraine-Russian relations. I've been involved with it for 4 years, and I will be the first to say I'm not an expert. But I do know that 10,000 plus women, children, and civilians have been killed in the Donbass region. And those people that refuse to admit that, they are ignorant. I do know that there are sectors of Nazis that were in Ukraine because guess what? Ukraine was aligned with the Nazis in World War II. It's common sense. It doesn't mean that the entire country is run by Nazis, just like it doesn't mean that the entire United States is run by the KKK or white supremacists or Black Lives Matter. But it means that there's a sector in there. Admit it. They won't even admit that. And if you dare bring it up, you're the bad guy. And then you bring
now, Scotty, let me ask you this. Practically speaking, have you ever thought about running for office?
You know, the problem is with it is that I work for the Russians. So, you know, they're going to do it. That would be the first thing in a campaign, which is not a problem in my eyes because I called I call strikes.
And imagine, since it's not a problem, imagine how gutsy it would be. No, but I'm serious, Scotty, because you're the kind of person I'd like to see run for office, and you've got a great resume for that, and you're bold. Here's why you're great, because you're bold, and I think it would shut people up. You know what? Someone may have said common sense. If Barack Obama in 2006 was talking to people and like, I'm thinking of running for president, right? And they said, are you crazy? They're never going to elect someone named Barack Hussein Obama. We just had 9/11. No one's going to ever do that. But you know what, Scotty? I think a lot of people, if you ran in the right district, don't run in New York City, for instance. Too far gone. But I'm just saying, if you ran in the right district, I think you could win, despite. But what would keep you from running? The attacks, or what would stop you?
Well, unfortunately, as we've seen in politics today, that it's not that it would stop me. It's that we've seen time and time again, the best candidate, number one, doesn't always run, and if they do, they don't always win. Because there is such a power machine. And I have to tell you, if the globalist agenda, if those in the Republican Party, the Mitch McConnells, if they think that Marjorie Taylor Greene is someone they need to be worried about, or others, I have another thing coming because I am one of those. And that's what I have no problem calling out my own party. I believe that we have to have our own house fixed before we go after the others. Agreed. And that is the problem, is that I have no agenda. I have no one that can control me. I have no strings that you could pull. Every skeleton in my closet has been on the front page of the National Enquirer. So there is not a problem on any sort of blackmail that they could have over my head, and for that would scare them because they couldn't control me.
Yeah, you know, plus I think it's the same reason I would never run. It's I'm a little bit libertarian. I have some, you know, I would like to be a Republican if they would. There's a few things that the Democrats have that I believe in. I'm a free-thinking person, and I look at the issues. You know, you have to join a sorority or a fraternity to run for office in the United States of America, generally speaking. Look what they did to Tulsi Gabbard. If you want to see what happens when you buck if you're a free thinker, just look what they did to her. And I love what Scotty said earlier because I think it's exceptionally important right now. I'm not saying the whole thing is, but there's certainly a wag the dog. For people that don't know what that means, there's a movie, I think it was made back in the early 90s, about a fake war that was put on to make a president look better. All you have to do is look at Biden speak about Ukraine. He's energized. He has focus. He's happy. He takes questions. He has things to say. Ask him about coronavirus. Ask him about inflation. Ask him about oil. Ask him about just about anything else, and he gets angry. He's tight. His face gets twisted, and everybody's we're dog-faced pony soldier, right?
No, agreed. Now, we're out of time. Great job, Mark Frost. Thanks for joining us. To Faran Fronczak and Scotty Nell Hughes. Tell people real quickly where they can find you now.
Scotty and Hughes on Twitter, because that's about all I haven't been banned from yet.
Okay, and we follow you there, and of course it's a great feed. Thanks so much for a great week, everybody. We'll be back Monday on the best damn talk show in the world. I'm Lee Stranahan. This is Backstory.